Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome. My name is Lacy and this is my art channel. So today we're opening up the September ScrawlrBox. If you didn't know, ScrawlrBox is an online art subscription. It's fairly popular in the YouTube art community. I'm usually about a month late because this box comes from the UK, so it takes quite a while for it to reach me. This time I'm actually about 2.5 months late because I've had some problems getting my videos out, and if you've been here for a while, you may have noticed that I haven't uploaded in about a month and a half. This is mainly because I had some big software problems. It's a long story. I can share it if you're interested. It's just mainly about how my software has failed me. But I'm happy to be back at it. I also visited my family in the US for a week in November, and I will be going for about 9 days or so in December, so my upload schedule may be a bit iffy until after the holidays. It's unfortunate because I was hoping to do some holiday related content, but unfortunately it is what it is. Anyway, I appreciate all of your love and support. It really does mean a lot to me. I've seen that I've had a lot of subscribers lately and comments, and I super appreciate that. And we finally hit over 200 subscribers, which is amazing. Now that you all know a bit about what's going on with me, let's go ahead and get into today's video. It's going to be at least a little bit of a long one. Here's the September ScrawlrBox. So first I like to empty out the box so we could just get rid of it, make room. The tissue paper holds all of the art supplies, and then we have the ScrawlrZine, the art print, and the paper pad. The prompt this month is fascinating folklore. It says, "Curiouser and curiouser, this month's box is inspired by our featured artist's Balkan-inspired illustrations. From folklore, tales to unique customs, we encourage you to take a deep dive into exploring the celebrated, bizarre, and sometimes dark traditions of your heritage. Play around with composition, patterns, and mix up your bark making to tell your tales and your creations." Next is a Derwent Technique eraser, a 3B Lyra Robertson pencil, a sour candy rope, and the main art supply is the Faber-Castell 5-pit Artist Pen Dual Markers. It comes in 5 colors: orange, red, blue, green, and brown, and each pen has a brush nib on one side and a fine nib on the other that is a 0.8. They are water-based India ink markers. The Faber-Castell markers also come with their own book discussing the brand, etc. Here's a better look at the artist print, and then we're going to take a look at the ScrawlrZine. First, we can see everything that is supposed to be in the box. Next, we see this month's featured artist, which is Tia Jurisic. It gives an insight to her and her artwork. Then it talks more in depth about the main art supply, which in this case is the Faber-Castell markers. It gives tips on things to try and some tips from the featured artist. After that, we could see the Scrawlr Gallery. It's some examples of artwork that people made using the Scrawlr Challenge hashtag from the July box. And then it talks more in depth about Faber-Castell. Every month I read the entire Zine, and I find it really interesting and enlightening reading about different brands, art supplies, how to use them, and other artists and their art processes. Next, I like to take out my sketchbook and I just go ahead and tape in the prompt so I don't forget what it is, and I decorate the page with the stickers. After that, I go ahead and swatch the supplies in the book. I swatch the pencil twice so I can try out the eraser, and then I swatch each of the markers as well. Initially, I did like the vibrancy and the smoothness of the markers. I also have very smooth paper in this sketchbook, so extra smooth. Because the prompt is fascinating folklores, I started researching what is a folklore exactly. The internet said that a folklore is a traditional belief, custom, or story of a community passed through the generations of word of mouth. I have learned about folklores in the past, like in school, but I wanted to look it up because I was a little bit confused between folk tales and folklores. Like, I thought those were the same thing. And a lot of sources use the words interchangeably, but then in one source, it said that the difference between folk tales and folklores are that folklores are stories of a community passed down, and that it refers to the heritage of that community, whereas folk tales are passed down from ancestors of a particular group of people to younger generations. So they are very similar. That being said, I can't guarantee that both of the stories I'm going to talk about today are folklores, but I think that they are. to the best of my knowledge. After I started reading about folklores and folktales, I kept seeing words like fables and legends and fairy tales and myths, and while all of those are fascinating, I found it hard to distinguish between them as some stories overlap into different genres, like some stories are both. Anyway, when I first started, I wanted to do the story of Johnny Appleseed. I wanted to draw a lot of Apple products along with Johnny Appleseed. I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to lay out the final piece, so I just wanted to kind of like doodle and see what I might add to it. So when I was drawing these doodles, I drew an apple tree, a bucket of apples, an apple, a seed, an apple pie, and plus Johnny Appleseed, of course. I saw so many depictions of Johnny Appleseed, but I ended up basing his design on a mixture of those illustrations that I saw and pictures of the real Johnny Appleseed when he was older. I kind of like the idea of drawing him when he was older because I wanted to draw like a big beard. It kind of gave me like lumberjack vibes. And I'm not sure why, but I always imagined him to look like that. I'm not sure if I saw a picture of him when I was younger that depicted him like that, or maybe I just made it up, I'm not sure. But while I draw these out, I wanted to talk a bit about the real Johnny Appleseed. I got this information from a public domain source, which means I can read it on YouTube without breaking copyright laws, etc. And any information that wasn't found in the book is common knowledge found in like many sources. The book is called A History of the Pioneer and Modern Times of Ashland County from the Earliest to the Present Date by H.S. Knapp, Knapp. I'm going to link the public domain down below in case you want to read it for yourself. It is very long, and I'm only going to just be talking about the parts that have to do with Johnny Appleseed. Also, I hope that you guys don't mind if I add things like this, like kind of educational or stories into my videos. I find that it's interesting to kind of listen to something while we're watching the process. I hope that you guys like it as well, and you should let me know in the comments if you like it or if you would just prefer to like have some music and I not talk. It's okay either way. It says, among those whose names stand conspicuous in the memorials of the early settlers is that of Jonathan Chapman, but more usually known as Johnny Appleseed. Few were more widely known or more extensively useful of the pioneers than this blameless and benevolent man. The evil that he done, if any, appears not to have been known. The good that he accomplished was not interred with his bones, but lives after him and bears its annual fruit over a surface of over 100,000 square miles, extending from the Ohio River to the northern chain of lakes. Few men, as unpretending, have been more useful to their race and their day and generation. Many of these best orchards now in Ashland City are of trees which had their first growth in his forest-environed nurseries. John Chapman was born in Massachusetts in 1775. He had a dream to produce apples in large quantities so that no one would be hungry. John Chapman was known to travel alone, going from place to place with apple seeds that he found at apple ciders. He was known to emigrate to different places like Pennsylvania, the Ohio Valley, and Indiana. He was known for wearing peculiar scraps of cast-off clothing and no shoes. The story says, in a November month and when the weather was unusually rigorous, Chapman was in Ashland, wearing a pair of shoes so dilapidated that they afforded no protection against the snow and mud. The late Elias Slocum, having a pair of shoes that he could not wear and that were suitable to the feet of Mr. Chapman, presented them to the latter. A few days after this occurrence, Mr. Slocum met the old man in Mansfield, walking the snow-covered streets in bare feet. In reply to the inquiry as to the reason he did not wear his shoes, Chapman replied that he found a poor, barefooted family moving westward who were in much greater need of clothing than himself, and that he had made the man a present of them. He was known to be generous, and he was known to think of others before himself. The story says he declined repeatedly invitations to take food with the elder members of the family at the first table, and it was not until he became fully assured that there would be an abundant supply of food for the little children who had remained in waiting that he would partake the proffered hospitality. He was never known to have slept in a bed, his habit being either to camp out in the woods or, if sleeping in the house, to occupy the floor. He placed very little value upon money. His cash receipts from sales of fruit trees were invested in objects of charity or in the purchase of books, illustrating his peculiar religious faith. A letter from Hon. John H. James of Urbana, Ohio, dated June 11th, 1862, says the account of Johnny Appleseed about what you inquire is contained in a letter of series addressed to the Cincinnati Horticultural Society at their request on early gardening in the West. These letters have been usually printed in the Cincinnati daily papers as a part of the society proceedings. That letter was republished in the Logan Gazette, of which I'm about to send you a copy this mail. The following is part of the communication referred to by Mr. James. The growing up apple trees from seeds gave employment to a man who came hither before this was a state. I first saw him in 1826, and have since learned something of his history. He came to my office in Urbana, bearing a note from the late Alexander Himmett. The letter spoke of him as a man generally known by the name of Johnny Appleseed, and that he might desire some counsel about a nursery he had in Champaign County. His case was this: some years before, he had planted a nursery on the land of a person who gave him leave to do so, and he was told that the land had been sold and was now in other hands, and that the present owner might not recognize his right to the trees. He did not seem very anxious about it, and continued walking to and fro as he talked, and at the same time continued to eat nuts. Having advised him to go and see the person, and that on stating his case he might have no difficulty, the conversation turned. I asked him about his nursery and whether the trees were grafted. He answered no, rather decidedly, and said that the proper and natural mode was to raise fruit trees from the seed. His name, as I learned afterward, was Jonathan Chapman. In 1801, he came into the territory with a horse load of apple seeds, gathered from the cider presses in western Pennsylvania. The seeds were contained in leathern bags, which had better suited to his journey than linen sacks, and besides, linen could not be spared for such a purpose. He came first to Lincoln County and selected a fertile spot on the bank of Lincoln Creek, where he planted his seeds. I am able to say that if it was on the farm of Isaac Stadden, in this instance, as in others afterward, he would clear a spot for his purpose and make some slight enclosure about his plantation. Only a slight one was needed, for there was no cattle roaming about to disturb it. He would then return for more seeds and select other sites for new nurseries. When the trees were ready for sale, he left them in charge of someone to sell for him at a low price, which was seldom or never paid in money, for that was a thing the settler rarely possessed. If people were too poor to purchase trees, they got them without pay. He was at little expense, for he was ever welcome at the settlers' homes. So basically, the story is saying that John Chapman was of good nature and just wanted to help others. In the book, a woman, Miss Rosella Rice, said among his many eccentricities was one of bearing pain like an undaunted Indian warrior. He gloried in suffering. Very often he would thrust pins and needles into his flesh without a tremor or quiver, and if he had a cut or sore, the first thing he did was sear it with a red-hot iron and then treat it as a burn. He hardly ever wore shoes except in winter, but if traveling in the summertime and the rough road hurt his feet, he would wear sandals and a big hat that he made himself out of pasteboard, with one side very large and wide and bent down to keep the heat from his face. No matter how oddly he was dressed or how funny he looked, we children never laughed at him, because our parents all loved and revered him as a good old man, a friend, and a benefactor. Almost the first thing he would do when he entered a house and was wearied was to lie down on the floor with his knapsack for a pillow and his head toward the light of a door or a window, when he would say, "Will you have some fresh news right from heaven?" and carefully take out his old worn books, a testament, and 2 or 3 others, the exponents of the beautiful religion that Johnny so zealously lived out, the Swedenborgian doctrine. She also said that he died near Fort Wayne, Indiana, in 1846 or 1848, a stranger among strangers who kindly cared for him. He died the death of the righteous, calmly and peacefully, and with little suffering or pain. So long as his memory lives, will a grateful people say, he went about doing good. I obviously couldn't read the entire book, but I did read a lot of the parts that kind of it captured who John Chapman or Johnny Appleseed was as a person. Like I said, I am going to link this book in the description, so if you want, you can check it out. As for the drawing, unfortunately, I ended up deciding not to choose this as my final piece. I was really disappointed because I kind of thought this was the perfect folklore for autumn, even though autumn's kind of over now. At the time, it was autumn, and apples are such a great fruit to depict in the autumn, but I realized that I really just didn't have enough colors. I had no color for Johnny's complexion, so I would have to leave it white, but he also had a white beard, and then his shirt was supposed to be white, so it was all going to be white. And because I had to use the brown as the inking color, it'd be hard to color in anything that had to be brown. I could have done a picture with no outline, but like for me, I really do enjoy having an outline. I think it's like an easy way to bring the whole picture together, but without brown, that only gives us 4 colors. In the design, it had suggested coloring on a palette and adding a bit of water to use the ink more like a watercolor, similar to what we did in the July ScrawlrBox when we had the India ink in the bottles. I really didn't want to do that. I thought that it sort of defeated the purpose of having them in marker form. So I decided to scrap this idea and instead do the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Now, technically this is a legend, but like I said, I was getting kind of confused between all of the different genres, and it was also referred to as a folktale or a folklore, sorry. Well, we're gonna see how it goes. Though, spoiler alert, I didn't really like how this piece comes out, and I thought everything was kind of going downhill fast, but we're just gonna see what happens. I did go ahead and just tape this paper into my sketchbook. I find that it helps as I have like a desk mat on my desk that's a little plushy, so it's hard to draw on. You're going to see me sketching out the picture. I didn't realize at the time that I was using my mechanical pencil instead of the pencil provided. I do eventually change to the pencil that was provided, but it's not like I'm submitting this in with the hashtag or anything like that, so no worries. So first I want to give my apologies. I know that this video is kind of all over the place. I'm trying to get used to this new video editing software, and I lost some footage in the process. I know that the audio was kind of talking about the first illustration while I was doing the second illustration. I do apologize. It's been a whole mess, to be honest, but I do appreciate those who stuck it out and have made it this far. My final thoughts on these markers are that they're not my favorite. Not really something that I would want to use again, as they were very dark in color. Maybe eventually I'll find a use for them. This time, I just felt that ScrawlrBox just didn't give us enough resources. There's no inking pen, and I really felt like an inking pen could have made some difference. But in the end, I decided that I didn't really care about being in the Scrawler Challenge and ended up adding a black inking pen and a white Posca pen to liven up the piece. But again, I really just didn't like this illustration at all. I don't think it's my best work, and I definitely won't be hanging this one on my wall or anything like that. To be honest, lately I've been second guessing this series because I do enjoy trying out new supplies, but so far I just don't think the supplies are things that I'm going to be using outside of these videos, or if I do, I just won't use them often. When I signed up for the box, I told myself I would try it for 6 months and see how I like it, and so far I'm considering stopping the subscription and going back to my sticker subscription, as I felt like it brought me more enjoyment and it was something that I used more often. That being said, we should still have 3 more ScrawlrBox videos coming up. If you do like this series, you should let me know, because like I said, I'm just unsure of it at this point. I don't want any of you to think that means I hate ScrawlrBox, because that's not it at all. I do think it's a good opportunity to try new things, but I don't want to have too many supplies that may be wasted, which I feel like is what's happening. I'm having too many things that I don't feel like I'm gonna use outside of the videos. Anyway, I'm going to end my dialogue here for now. Thank you if you made it this far. I appreciate you. I know this was a struggling video. If you did like this video, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, as that directly helps me in my channel. I also have other forms of social media. I have a link tree down below. You can just click it and you'll see all of my social media links. You're welcome to chat with me in the comments here or reach out via social media. I'd love to hear from you. I do look forward to seeing everyone in the next video. I'm just not exactly sure when it's going to come out, because I am still getting used to the software, and like I said at the beginning of the video, my husband and I are going to take a small vacation to the US for the holidays. Let's just hope that the next video goes a lot smoother than this one did. I do look forward to seeing all of you next time, and thanks again. Bye.
Spring is the season that wakes me alive, and fall is the season to contemplate life. Oh, yeah. I don't know what is it exactly in this time of year that makes the melancholy me reappear. Oh, yeah. Back and forth through dark roast coffee, salt, mist, and sea, sand and amber trees. 'Cause it still feels like summer, but it's soaked in nostalgia slowly. All the leaves, they're turning brown. 'Cause it still feels like summer, and I simply don't wanna see the cool wind sneak back in our town. 'Cause we lived when it was out bare feet, tan skin glistening beneath the heat, evening swirl into a bird song beat. God, it's now so very bittersweet. So I guess I'll just put on my favorite sweater and say goodbye to summer. I keep on forgetting times learn how to fly, and before I know it, it passes me by. Oh, I don't know why when life is beautiful I start to fear it'll slip through my fingers and just disappear. Oh, back and forth through dark roast coffee, salt, mist, and sea, sand